Hello, I'm Alan Davies, and this is As Yet Untitled. It's just a conversation with some guests. We don't have any prepared questions or agendas or things to plug or anything. At the end of it, we're intending to come up with a title for the show, and that's our sole agenda. We'll get straight on with it. Please really welcome my guests. Thank you very much. Hello. OK, so let me introduce my four guests here. We've got Lizzie Roper here, who used to employ a vibrator to liven up afternoons with Christian Slater. Ben Miller, who once received a threatening phone call from Peter Purvis and is often mistaken for Ben Stiller, of course. Patrick Kielty is here, who nearly died in a helicopter with Neil Armstrong. We'll come to that. And Felicity Ward is here, who's only recently learned how to use a skirt. Congratulations. These are our facts. Welcome, everyone, to a round table. Come on, Roper. Keep it together.
Oh, good. I'm really looking forward to this.
Is Christian Slater a kind of rhyming slang for vibration?
I think it should be, shouldn't it?
It is now.
Bring it on, ladies.
Oh, my batteries are running out on me, Christian Slater.
I'm very dedicated.
No, I should explain. I know Lizzie quite well. And Lizzie was in a play with Christian Slater in London's fabulous glittering West End.
Cuckoo's Nest.
Cuckoo's Nest,
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah.
What was your role in that? Prostitute, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, prostitute / girlfriend, but she was a fun girl. Whoa, and she wasn't, stingy. She let it all hang out.
But it still was dull enough on an afternoon with Christian that you needed a Christian Slater.
Well, the thing was, we were in a hit show. It was a sellout, smash hit, standing ovations every night.
Was it the vibrators that made it sell out?
No.
Oh.
It was a free one with every ticket.
But come a Thursday matinee, all you could smell was piss and biscuits. It was...
Old people.
Like, oh, do you want to go to the theatre? Yes, Cuckoo's Nest. Can you eat it? Yes.
So they would turn up on a Thursday afternoon, and we were normally loved, and then we would just be stared at like naughty children, and all the laugh lines went for nothing, and all the crying went for nothing.
An altogether more discerning audience.
Yes. So we were in the heart of Soho, so between matinees, most days I would be grabbed by a member of the cast and frog marched around a local sex shop. And then one day...
What's that, Dave Johns?
Yes. Yeah. Dave Johns is a Geordie comedian, half a Geordie bricklayer, half monkey. And so he discovered that there was such a thing as a remote-controlled vibrator.
Oh,
Yes,
shut up.
there is.
Yes. Well,
No, there's not. No, there's not. So somebody once told me that.
Take this wedding ring off.
Oh, there we go. Okay, that's...
Even now, I'm pleasuring somebody.
You think they're all laughing, but they're all on
You hear a
remote.
voice of this and goes, stop it now!
well, that's it. The thing is, so it was decided that we would play this brilliant game that I would have to put the thing down my pants.
You'd have to. You
Have
had
to.
to.
On pain of death. And then I would have to go on stage and I would have to guess.
On stage?
Yes, I'd have to guess which member of the cast had the button that was setting it off. And I thought it was a brilliant idea until I was waiting in the wings and suddenly this... Oh, God! And, it was really strong. Oh, it was far too strong. I went on stage and I discovered it's actually quite easy to wear a remote control vibrator if you've got a line, because you can put that in the middle of it. But if you haven't got a line and you're supposed to be quiet, you will find yourself going, ah! which really doesn't work in a mental hospital when you're a good time girl.
So who was it?
So who
With
was
the-
it?
Yeah, who had the button?
Yeah.
Fucking Dave Johns.
Dave Johns. Davey Johns.
What range did it work from?
When he was at home.
So, Ben, look, I want you to tell me what happens when people think you're Ben Stiller.
Well, I have to say, more than Ben, so most often I get confused for Rob Brydon.
Oh, of course.
He was a lot for Rob Brydon. And
Chin.
I can't see myself.
You have seen yourself before, though, yeah?
And Anton Dubek is the other one that I
What? You could make big money being a looky-likey. I'd have a go.
I know, and it's
Another one of these.
it's great to know you'd have a go, but I think it's in a way it's sort of a poetic justice, isn't it? You know, if you put yourself in the public eye, you know, to some extent, you know, I obviously want recognition for being myself. You know, it's an attempt, isn't it, to make your mark in some way and to be continually confused for another person. Albeit a very talented man like Rob Brydon is galling. Oh, God, yes, the last person to confuse me was Stephen Fry at the BAFTAs, who I went to, who I love so much. And well, you know, and who I've been on QI with.
Yeah, well, he sat you next to Rob
He
Brydon.
sat me next to Rob Brydon, yeah.
and
he said,
they actually
oh my
kissed.
God,
It was very,
my
very
darling, how wonderful to see you. How is the Italian trip? Yeah, and I said it was great. I lied to Stephen Fry. I pretended to be Rob Brydon.
Yeah, little Rob
It's
Brydon.
absurd, but sometimes that's the better thing to do, is just pretend. You know, so if someone asked for it,
Because
I just
Stephen would
sign
have
Rob.
absolutely felt mortified.
Yes, well, that's the thing. I couldn't possibly let him know, because I knew he'd feel awful. So I pretended to be Rob for the rest of the evening. I accepted an award. No, and then on this particular occasion, I was in a film called The Prince and Me, and the idea was we were going to go to Cannes as my sort of big break in the movie world. We were going to announce the film, and then there was going to be almost like an auction where all the people who are in the film were going to meet the potential distributors, and we were going to say it was going to be a big party and all this sort of stuff. Very exciting. So I flew into Cannes. On the way in, there was an article in Screen International on about page 7, down there, sort of tiny light. Miller flies into Cannes. I was thinking, hello, here we go. And I landed in Cannes. There's a limo to meet me at the airport, and we swoosh straight through all those amazing sort of windy streets. I arrive at the Carlton Hotel, which is the hotel on the front in Cannes. They meet me. The manager of the hotel meets me out in the red carpet. He leads me up the red carpet. He says, would you like a tour of the hotel? Would you like to see the other rooms? And so I said, yes, that'd be great. Leads me around the hotel. This is how it works as we go. This is such and such a suite. And here is your room, monsieur. And he pushes open the doors of the penthouse at the top of the Carlton Hotel, which looks across the whole of Cannes. On the table is a kind of mountain of champagne bottles and bowls of fruit and sort of women holding bunches of grapes. And, I mean, it's just extraordinary. There's a massive 4-poster bed. They said, thank you very much. We are so honoured to have you here. Please enjoy yourselves. Nothing is too much trouble. And close the door. And I go, all right. All right. Eat that, Rob Brydon. And I go over to the table, and there's a beautiful sort of gilt-edged envelope. And as I'm pouring my champagne, I'm holding my champagne saucer in one hand. I casually opened this envelope. I pulled it out. I said, "Welcome to the Carlton Hotel, Mr. Ben Stiller." Yeah. So of course, in that moment, I think, how long have I got?
Yeah.
Like, how long have I got? I'm on the clock, clearly. So that's the tour of the hotel, 50 minutes. He's downstairs.
I would like a jet, a private jet.
Exactly.
You're at your poo somewhere.
So I get the festival program. I go through it, and is anyone I know? And I'm phoning them. I just phone everyone I know that is in Cannes. I say, you've got to get round here now because I'm in Ben Stiller's suite at the Carlton Hotel. I've got all his champagne, and if you get here now, we can drink it. In 20 minutes, the room is full of practically everyone in the British film industry. It's just absolutely brilliant fun.
So how were you
Absolutely brilliant fun.
rumbled? So did Ben Stiller walk in and scream?
I detected a sort of chill in the air over the coming days. I obviously knew.
Over the coming days?
Oh, yeah, I was there for 2 more days.
Wow.
You stayed in the room.
I stayed in the room.
You can watch the rest of this episode on UK TV Play. And now for some extra stories that didn't make the show. Paddy, you started doing stand-up comedy when you were incredibly young, didn't you? I mean, 17, were you? Were you that sort of age when you started doing stuff?
Yeah, and I didn't want to have a job, and so we set up a comedy club in Belfast, and it was the Empire Club, which you played.
I did a couple of times.
Yeah.
But that's what made me think, because when I went over there, I think it was about 92, something like that.
Yeah.
So I would have been 25, 26, and I've been doing stand-up a couple of years. But so you're 5 years younger than me. You must have been so young.
Yeah.
But you were doing some quite edgy stuff. I mean, we'd come over from the UK over to Belfast, which is a part of the UK, of course. Oops. Make comments like that. Continually fall through the cracks, paranoid. And it was a bit of a scary place, Ben, because, you know, there were armoured Land Rovers, and police stations had 25-foot high fences, and the Land Rovers had skirts down to the floor so you couldn't throw bombs under them and all that. And we'd never seen anything like that. And then we go into the comedy club with our little routines that went quite well down in Balham or something. And he's on stage doing stuff about the Troubles and stuff about Belfast.
Yeah, but what was really strange about it was comedians would come over and they would do that thing, you know, you've got your 20-minute set, and they'd walk onto Belfast and say, do you ever notice when you're on the tube?
Yeah.
And Belfast people, you know, in most other, you know, gigs, you would just get booed off. But in Belfast, there was, you know, potential violence off the back of it. Like, I couldn't work it out at the time because growing up there, I thought all of that was normal. And remember what we used to do? We used to pick you up, and we used to drive you around the town first and show you all these different places. And so, you know, we'd be driving around Belfast, and we'd say, you know, that's where these people were shot, and you know, there was a whole tour that you would do with a comedian.
I heard you could ask a taxi driver and they will do that for you, still in Belfast.
Yes, they will.
Yeah.
And we haven't really moved on. Like, we've had 25 years of peace, and the only thing that we have now for tourism is the Titanic. So we've basically gone from shooting people to drowning people. That's essentially all.
It's a very good attraction, though, the Titanic.
It is. Well, it is.
I've been. It's good.
So
And what would their reaction be when? I mean, would they? did they get slightly nervous? When they
you did that.
Well, I found what happened was it was difficult to follow Paddy, because Paddy is very funny for a start, but also he's doing such local stuff that they're really into.
It's hard to follow someone
And then you do it, but it's really is. And then you start doing your act, and they would just chat. Really, they would chat and wait for you to finish. And
that's on a good night.
on a good night.
No, there was beer and coins. Was normally.
Is that how you paid? They paid you?
That's how you pay.
Yeah, that's how they paid.
But from there, you'd then go to Derry, and then or London Derry, depending who you talk to, and then you'd go down to Galway and across to Cork.
Yeah.
I remember going into Derry, and there was a bar there where there had been a shooting that week, so there were 7 or 8 people had been shot dead that week, and there was. So there's all flowers outside, and you know, all this tributes, and so you have to go on, and you can't not mention it. I said something like, "Hi, I'm Alan. I don't know anything about anything. Don't shoot me." And this got a big laugh. You know?
Yeah. No, I did.
Because they quite liked the fact that you'd said something, at least.
Yeah.
You know, and I subsequently discovered more recently, I went back to London Derry, did a show. So, what do they call it now? They call it something else. They've got a word.
Stroke City, don't they?
Stroke City, because it's London Derry, Stroke
And
Derry.
they call it Derry, London Derry now as well.
Legendary, they call
Legendary.
it.
They
Legendary.
basically,
Yeah, they've kind of adopted something else.
Great.
So Legendary is quite a popular name.
Yeah.
And there's one side of the river is one side of the divide, and the other side's the other side, and all this stuff. But you know nothing about it.
But that club was a weird club, because it was actually probably in the nicest part of Belfast we could possibly have put it.
Yeah.
And we had comedians coming over and then coming back here and pretending that they'd done a gig in Vietnam. and we were thinking it's quite a nice, leafy, tree-lined road at the back of the university. And we used to have film crews coming over as well and doing, American film crews out the front of the, while Belfast burns, young people laugh. Today downtown. It was all that type of.
So classy then.
Yeah. And I remember growing up at the time, and I always was going through the papers, and as when you compare a comedy club, it's that thing of you do the news. And I remember just opening the paper and going through the news, and I didn't realise at that time that, The Sun and The Mirror had different copy editions for different parts of the UK. So I remember my very first time I'd ever been in London, and I came over to do the Comedy Store. and I used to have a balaclava that I used on stage, and which in Belfast now this seems ludicrous, but I remember coming through Heathrow with this hold all and a balaclava, and I got stopped, and he said, "What's going on?" And I said, "I'm a comedian." He went, "Of course you are." And he brought me into the room, and you're looking around, and he's got these dishwashing gloves on, and you look around and there's no sink, and
no dishes.
no dishes.
The place is spotless.
No, it wasn't where he went.
Oh, you've been travelling.
I'd been travelling, and I remember it's been held there for about an hour and a half, and then took the tube and came up in Leicester Square and went into the Comedy Store, and I thought at that time that you guys had the same version of the newspapers as we had, so I assumed that Jerry Adams and Ian Paisley was in the front of the Sun. I just remember people just looking at me going, "What's he talking about? We really don't care." And my reaction there was as good as some of the acts that came to Belfast.
Right. No, what got on the news here was if a soldier got
Yeah.
killed. That's what made the news.
Yeah.
Here, the rest of it. That was the odd thing about those things, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But of course, you lost your father, didn't you? So
I did, yeah.
What's amazing about you, to me, is that you, a couple of years after that happened,
Yeah.
after your father was shot, you start a comedy club and you start doing stand-up comedy about it. Do you think back and think, what was I doing? Was that part of coping?
Yeah, I don't know.
Or do you not connect the two things at all? Or?
I tell you what was strange about it was there were so many people in Northern Ireland that died that weren't involved in anything really. And my dad was he was a building contractor, and he looked after, he employed both sides. And in Belfast you had to pay your protection money. It was essentially a mafia. The city was carved up as a mafia, and I didn't find this out until recently, that my dad had actually decided to give evidence against these guys that were running a protection racket. Wow. And that was the reason. And I did a gig for Dave, one night stand in Belfast, and afterwards this woman came up to me and she said, "Oh, very good show, blah, blah, blah." And I thought, great, how long am I going to have to talk to this woman before I can get back to the bar? And she said, "My husband knew your dad." And I said, "Oh, that's really nice." And she said, "Yeah, they were going to give evidence in the same trial." And so a week later, I ended up meeting this guy, and I said, "No, my dad wasn't stupid. He wasn't going to he wasn't going to give evidence in a trial." And he said, "No, he was." He said, and we were the first people to give evidence in Northern Ireland behind a screen. And the trial collapsed, and I still didn't believe this guy. And then he showed me he still had this gun. He still had a personal protection weapon because the trial had collapsed, and this was over 20 years later. Wow. And so at the time there were so many people, so many families who were in the same position that you didn't feel by going on stage, this is something unique that has happened to our family, and so therefore I'm going to go on, I'm going to do stand-up about it. You actually felt everybody in Northern Ireland knew someone.
Everyone was carrying on in some way.
Yeah, well, everybody knew a cousin or a neighbour or something that had happened. So in a very, very strange way, you almost felt part of a club. You felt that it would have been much more difficult to get up on stage in Northern Ireland and try to do political satire if you hadn't been. Mm-hmm. And I remember...
Right, so it almost gives you a licence or something to
go
there.
It just allowed you to do it. And I remember we used to have, guys coming in all the time. You'd have off-duty policemen and IRA people and all this. And a guy came up to me one night and he said, "Oh, we like those jokes, but we don't like those jokes. So a few more of those jokes, but not those jokes." And I said,
Crystal.
I said, "Okay." I said, "What jokes are those jokes and what jokes are these jokes?" "You know those jokes." "Not those jokes, those jokes." And I said, "Well, what's going to happen?" I said,
Was he a critic?
He was. He was in from Chortle. And he was basically telling me that if I didn't change my material, that he was gonna, you know,
Who knows what?
well, no, he very much told me that there'd be plastic kneecaps involved.
Wow.
And I just, at that time, I was, you know, my dad had died a few years before, and I said, look, I said, really? I said, you know, I'm an okay comedian. I said, but if you want to turn a shit comedian into a legend, I said, go ahead. That was probably one of the stupidest things I ever said in my life. And lucky enough, he went away. But those were those times, and I never thought they were, until I moved away, I never thought they were special. You know, we just assumed that's how the world was.
But you always assume that your own upbringing is how everyone else lives until you have a comparison.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know that I was poor until I started seeing people with money and going, oh, their parents don't water their Weetabix first and then drain them and then put milk on it. Okay.
Wow. All right. That's a nice little tip.
Yeah, it is. It's a good money saver.
What am I doing here?
Because it absorbs less milk?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
How rich were your parents?
Listen, we had shredded wheat, Weetabix,
Cocoa Pops.
Wheatos, Cocoa Pops.
I once had shredded wheat. I've only shredded. It's really, I feel like after Paddy's story about growing up in Northern Ireland,
It does.
I'm now going to follow that with a story about collecting things from cereal packets. This gives you some idea of the issues that affected my childhood.
Would I get the full set?
Yeah, that's what I was worried
That's a
about.
dilemma. That's a dilemma.
But so I said I want to get shredded wheat now because I want this thing. I don't remember what it was. And I had one shredded wheat. We got a big box. It's inedible. I mean, it's absolutely inedible. Right? It's not food. So
It's like eating fiberglass.
I climbed the fence and hid it in the neighbour's shed, the entire box, and I hid it well. You know. Anyway, about a week later, there's a knock on the front door, and then my dad comes in.
Looking for the
Dad comes
shredded
in with a
wheat.
packet of shredded wheat, and he says, "Did you put this in Mr. Mendoza's shed?" Nice.
And you said...
No. Bang to rights.
Yeah.
But you used to bury your pants in the front garden.
Yeah.
Why would you hide shredded wheat in a shed?
He was a dog in a previous life.
We only had the one. I lost my mum when I was little, so I only had my dad. So there was no way around him, and so if you didn't want him to know something, you just had to literally bury it. So if you had soiled yourself, and you didn't want him to know that you'd soiled yourself, you would bury your underpants in the garden.
A tasty treat for any dog.
The trouble with that was when I went back to check on the underpants and they'd gone from the hole, the shallow grave in which I placed them, I knew that he would know they were mine because my name was sewn in the back of them. And I hadn't thought it through to cut that out.
Surely, though, do you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older brother and a younger sister.
Right, so it could have been their pants had you cut it out.
Yeah, I don't even know if they were soiling themselves.
Not your sister's pants.
Not my sister, no, she didn't wear paisley wife fronts.
We get paisley wife fronts in Northern Ireland as well.
Just say no on them. Just say never.